Taiwan is an island with thick forests and high mountains. It was formed when the Philippine Sea Plate and the Eurasian Sea Plate converged approximately 4 million years ago. The high mountains here were once covered by a glacier. After a long period of evolution, the area has become a paradise for living things. Nonetheless, due to the rising Earth temperature in recent years, the rate of extinction has increased. According to a new study in Nature magazine, if the rate of weather change continues, over 1 million species will face extinction by 2050, or even up to 37% of all species. This is a global crisis. Living things in Taiwan will not be able to escape this catastrophe. Neither will the Formosan salamander. Formosan salamanders were first discovered in the early 20th century. Because of their limited number, information about them is few. Their life continues to be a mystery. The Formosan salamander was discovered in 1996 in Guanwu. Hence, we call it the Guanwu Formosan Salamander. Because their body shape and color are different from those of other areas, it is thought to be a new species. Guanwu in northern Taiwan is foggy year-round, with huge variations in daytime and nighttime temperatures. About 2,000 meters above sea level, it has evident seasonal changes and is host to a diverse ecosystem. Humidity is between 70 to 90%. Inside the forest, sunshine visibility is less than 30%, and the temperature is often below 10 degrees Celsius. The damp and cold environment is habitat to amphibians, reptiles, and the Formosan salamander. To protect these 180 million-year-old living fossils from the Jurassic Period, the Shei-pa National Park Headquarters began its long-term planning and research in 1999 to better understand the life and history of these salamanders and formulate relevant conservation measures. This is also our purpose in searching for the Guanwu Formosan Salamander these many years. The Guanwu Formosan Salamander found today can grow to about 10 centimeters. It has a black back and a body covered with tiny white spots. The salamander moves very slowly, but has a head strong enough to burrow into soil to forage on invertebrates. It lives near the water, a trait generally common to amphibians and reptiles. Sometimes they move about farther from water. In addition to natural disasters and human intervention, its natural enemies include predators such as birds, snakes, rodents, and monkeys. These Formosan rock monkeys search for food under the rocks. They threaten the salamanders, which like to hide under rocks. The mountain keelback is the Formosan salamander's greatest natural enemy. Active mostly during daytime, the snake can be readily found near the habitat of salamanders. The snake normally forages under vegetation or in rock crevices. Hiding inside crevices, the salamander senses its approaching enemy and tries to avoid the enemy's attack. When unable to avoid the snake, the salamander remains still. Because the salamander probably knows that it cannot outrun the enemy, it avoids attracting attention or provoking the snake by remaining in this position. Apparently, this snake does not intend to let go of the salamander. The snake is looking for a better angle to strike and enjoy a sumptuous meal. Being a predator that relies heavily on its sense of smell, the snake uses its tongue to sense its prey. When the snake continues to stroke the salamander's body with its tongue, the salamander moves closer to death. After more than 10 minutes of this encounter, the snake suddenly moves in another direction. It seems the snake does not have a strong appetite. Thus, the salamander is given an opportunity to escape. It is a really interesting phenomenon. Most of the many small ponds in Guanwu's mountainous area are breeding grounds for amphibians. The Moltrectes green tree frog lays follicles in dried leaves by the pond. The frog lays from 300 to 400 eggs at a time. These eggs are enclosed inside the follicles, and each egg is enveloped by a transparent layer of jelly sac, which protects the egg during its development to an embryonic stage. After about 2 weeks, the eggs hatch into tadpoles, which live inside the protective follicles for a time. When the right time comes, the tadpoles will leave the follicles and swim into the water. Almost all amphibians undergo metamorphosis after hatching into a larval form. In the water, they feed on algae and dead plants. Their hind legs are the first to grow, followed by the front legs. The tadpoles become froglets after 30 to 40 days, during which time they begin to breathe using their lungs and skin. The froglets carry a tail, but when it gradually disappears, they will move out of the water to live on land. They look just like their parents. At this time, the small frogs mostly feed on small insects. They spend most of their time hiding under plants or in the mud. Sometimes they also rest on the leaves. During mating season, the Maltrectes green tree frogs give mating calls day and night. The frogs also live in mountainous areas in Guanwu, over 2,000 meters above sea level. They are a rare and protected species and close neighbors of the Guanwu Formosan Salamanders. Formosan salamanders are close relatives of the frog. Although they are both amphibians, their lives are not entirely the same. Some amphibians lay their eggs inside bamboo or on twigs. Others like to build nests below rocks to protect their eggs. We observed that the Guanwu Formosan Salamander, which belongs to the order Urodela and looks similar to a lizard, instinctively search for mates in the water during the winter mating season. The mating spots on their body are intensely visible during this time. When a prospective mate is found, the male courts the female from under the female's body and patiently waits for the female to lay eggs. Normally, the salamander lays a pair of bean-shaped jelly sacs at a time. The number of eggs in each jelly sac differs. There can be 4 to 15 eggs in each sac. The male then moves between the eggs back and forth to fertilize them. Guanwu is especially cold in winter. The foggy and low temperature weather allows the embryo to develop slowly in the eggs. It is the male's responsibility to guard and protect the eggs at this time. On the other hand, the female leaves the water temporarily to rest on shore. She returns to guard her eggs after she has recovered her strength. Together with the male salamander, she protects the eggs from microbial infection and their natural enemies. After 1 month, the embryo inside the eggs starts to move. Each jelly sac is divided into 3 layers. The eggs are kept inside the innermost layer and left to grow. winter leaves as spring approaches. The flowering season of the Magao plant is the most critical moment in the life of the Guanwu Formosan Salamander. This is when its young struggle to survive. During this time, the embryos become fully developed. They become stronger, and their bodies become darker in color. The innermost layer of the jelly sac begins to open up as the embryos grow and push outward. In 2 months, the eyes of the embryos can be seen clearly. Their bodies have become more similar to that of adults. They have also developed gills and limb buds. After 2.5 months, the embryos become more active. The innermost layer of the sac swells to its maximum size, ready to explode anytime. Ultimately, the embryos burst through the membrane, swim into the follicle along the outer membrane to the edge of the jelly sac. After a few minutes of rest, the tiny salamanders jerk with full force, break out of the sac, and swim to the water. They've grown front and hind limbs and 3 pairs of unique outer gills. Able to swim well, they look very different from the legless tadpoles. When summer comes and their gills disappear, the small salamander crawls to dry land, hides in the loose humus layer or below rocks in the forest to forage, and lives exactly like its parents. Such is the life of a Guanwu Formosan Salamander. We spent 3 years studying and making this documentary film. In the end, we were able to solve the mystery of the life of the Guanwu Formosan Salamanders and establish a milestone in the conservation of the species. This is only the beginning, because every life formation in nature needs to overcome trials and tribulations to be able to survive. Although the Guanwu Formosan Salamanders can breed safely, they do need protection of their habitats in the future. In recent years, unpredictable weather in Guanwu has often resulted in disaster. Earthquakes, floods, and avalanches have gravely threatened the habitats of the Formosan salamander. Some habitats have been completely altered or destroyed, and suitable breeding grounds are disappearing. While eluding their predators, the Guanwu Formosan Salamanders must still face greater natural disasters. During the first year of our filming, Typhoon Air brought strong winds and heavy rains on August 25, 2004. Mountainous regions were devastated by debris flows, and the area connecting Guanwu to the outside was completely buried under soil and rocks. More than a dozen people perished. All roads were cut off. Road beds were washed into river valleys extending for several kilometers. Almost all salamander habitats were destroyed. After the typhoon, we found lifeless bodies of 2 salamanders washed down by the mud flow. It bolstered our resolve to protect the Guanwu Formosan Salamander. Autumn is here. The river continues to nourish life. Falling maple leaves litter the mountain trails, serving as temporary shelter for the Guanwu Formosan Salamanders. In this foggy mountain is a deeply wounded land. We are walking alongside these living fossils from the Jurassic Period, struggling together to find a future.